My brother texted me on a Tuesday morning, 7 words, no punctuation, like it cost him nothing. We changed the code on the garage door. That was it. No explanation, no heads up. No sorry, by the way, I know your name is on the lease. I stared at my phone for a full minute. Outside my apartment window, a bus rolled by, someone honked twice, a pigeon landed on the ledge and left. The world kept moving. My brother had changed the garage door code on the house I was paying for. And apparently that was just something that happened on a Tuesday. I want to be honest with you about something before I go any further. I'm not someone who gets walked on easily. I grew up watching my mom stretch a grocery budget across 5 people and still manage to make the kitchen smell like something worth coming home to. I learned early that you don't hand things over for free. You protect what you've built, you read the fine print, and then I co-signed a lease for my brother. I was 29. He was 24. He'd just lost his job at the distribution warehouse. Not fired, technically, just restructured out, which in that part of Ohio means the same thing. He had a daughter from a relationship that ended badly, and he had custody every other weekend, and he had exactly $340 in his checking account, and a friend willing to let him sleep on a couch indefinitely. My mom called me crying on a Thursday night. She didn't ask. She never asked directly. She just described the situation in enough detail that asking became unnecessary. He just needs someone to vouch for him, she said. The landlord won't rent to him without a cosigner. His credit's not. It's not great right now. He's trying, sweetheart. He really is. I want to be fair to myself here. I did hesitate. I said, let me think about it. I said that out loud to my mother on the phone, and she said, of course, take your time, in the voice she uses when she has already decided what the right answer is and is simply waiting for you to arrive there. I took 4 days. I called my friend Shelby, who works in property management, and asked her what the exposure actually was. She told me co-signing meant I was equally responsible, not backup responsible. Not responsible. If he defaults and they can't find him responsible, equally. My credit, my name, my problem if anything went sideways. I said okay anyway. Looking back, I think I agreed because I genuinely believed it would be temporary. That's the thing nobody talks about when it comes to family financial stuff. It's never framed as permanent. It's framed as a bridge. A hand up, a few months, maybe 6, and then he'd be back on his feet and I'd be quietly removed from the paperwork and life would go on. My mom said that. My brother said that. I think I even said it to myself. The apartment was a 2-bedroom on Carver Street, about 40 minutes from where I lived. Ground floor, small yard in the back, washer and dryer in the unit, which felt like a luxury at that price point. The monthly rent was $1,340. My brother paid his half the first month and 3/4 of his half the second month, and then around month 4, he told me things were tight and could I just cover it this once. I covered it. He paid me back $60 over the following 2 weeks and then stopped mentioning it. I want to be precise here because the numbers matter and I'm tired of them being blurry in my own head. Over the next 14 months, I paid a total of $11,420 toward that lease. That's my share, his share, and several months of back and forth where he'd pay part and I'd quietly fill in the rest. I also bought the refrigerator, $680, because the unit came with a broken one and the landlord said it wasn't in the repair agreement. I paid the security deposit, $2,680, which was supposed to be split. My brother said he'd pay me back when his tax return came. His tax return came. He bought a used truck. I didn't say anything about the truck. I don't know exactly why. I think by then I had started to believe that saying something would make me the problem. Here's what I told myself. He had his daughter on weekends, and she needed a place that felt stable, and I was in a position to help make that happen, and wasn't that worth something? Wasn't it enough? I told myself that so many times it stopped feeling like a rationalization and started feeling like a value, and meanwhile, I was getting quieter about money at family dinners, not bitter, just quieter. My sister-in-law moved in around month 6. They weren't married yet. She just started being there. Her shampoo in the bathroom, her name on the parking sticker, her opinion on the curtains. I found out from my mom, not from my brother. I didn't say anything about that either. The thing is, I liked her well enough at first. She seemed organized. She had a steady job at a billing office downtown. I thought, okay, maybe this is good. Maybe she'll stabilize things. Maybe now he'll pay his half consistently because he'll have someone to be accountable to. Instead, what happened was, rent started being paid on time, but I stopped being consulted about anything. The dynamic shifted, not dramatically, not with a conversation or a confrontation, just slowly, the way a room gets colder when someone leaves a window open. They were a unit now. I was the name on the lease, a formality, background infrastructure. I kept paying. About 11 months in, I got a text from my sister-in-law. Not my brother, her. She said they were thinking about getting a dog and just wanted to give me a heads up, since technically it would need to go through the lease. I said I'd check the pet policy. I checked. The policy allowed one pet under refundable deposit. Deposit. I relayed this. She said, "Yeah, we already got him. He's a beagle. His name is Biscuit." Biscuit. I sat with that for a long moment. They had already gotten the dog. They had texted me not to ask permission, but to inform me after the fact, framed as a courtesy. The $400 deposit, which was non-refundable, which would come out of my security deposit, which I had paid alone, was now a done deal. I said, "You know that deposit comes out of what I put down, right?" She said, "We'll figure it out." They did not figure it out. Around month 13, I started keeping records, not in a dramatic, I'm building a case kind of way. More like I finally got tired of my own vagueness about the numbers, and I wanted to know clearly what I was actually dealing with. I made a spreadsheet. I went through 14 months of bank statements. I added it all up. The total, including the security deposit, the refrigerator, and every rent payment, I'd covered more than my share, $14,780. I looked at that number on my laptop screen for a long time. I wasn't angry, exactly. I was something closer to clarified, like when you've been squinting at something in dim light and someone finally turns on a lamp and you see it for exactly what it is. I'd spent 14 months telling myself a story about being helpful, being family, being in a position to give. What I actually was, spelled out in a spreadsheet, was a co-signer who had absorbed the financial risk and the majority of the cost of housing 2 adults and a beagle named Biscuit, and hadn't been thanked for any of it. I decided I would talk to my brother, not accusatory, not with the spreadsheet printed out and slid across a table, just honest. I wanted to have an actual conversation about what the next few months looked like, whether there was a plan for him to get the lease into his name alone, and whether we could settle up on what he owed. I called him on a Sunday afternoon. He didn't pick up. I called again on Tuesday. He said he was busy and could we talk later. I said sure. Wednesday I texted, "Hey, I want to find a good time to talk this week. It's about the Carver Street lease." He read it, didn't respond. My mom called me Friday. "I hear you want to talk to your brother about money," she said. Not, "I hear your brother owes you money." Not, "I hear you have some legitimate concerns." Just money, in the tone that meant the topic itself was distasteful. I said, "I've been covering his rent for over a year, Mom. I just want to have a conversation." She said, "He's going through a hard time." I said, "I know. I've been paying for it." There was a silence that said everything she wasn't going to say out loud. That weekend, there was a family birthday. My cousin's kid turning 1. Backyard cookout, the whole extended family, plastic tablecloths, and a sheet cake from the grocery store. I went. I wasn't going to not go because of a weird week with my brother. I showed up with a gift bag and a smile, and I meant both of them. My brother was there with my sister-in-law. They were perfectly pleasant to me. Surface-level friendly, the way you are with someone you've already decided something about. My mom was in her element, circulating, refilling chip bowls, being the center of warmth and order that she always was. At some point, I was in the kitchen getting a napkin. I heard my aunt talking to my mom near the back door. I wasn't trying to listen. I was just standing at the counter. My aunt said, "I can't believe how much he's grown up. You must be so proud." "And he's got that apartment now, all settled," you said. My mom said, "He really has. He did it on his own, you know. Just figured it out." I stood very still. "That's the thing about him," my mom said. "He always finds a way. He always finds a way." I walked back outside with my napkin. I sat next to someone I barely knew and talked about the weather in a completely normal voice. I think I even laughed at something. I'm not sure what. I don't know how to explain what it feels like to be erased from your own contribution in real time. It's not loud. Nobody yells. There's no moment where someone turns to you and says, "You never existed in this story." They just tell the story without you in it. And they tell it so naturally, so comfortably, that you start to wonder if maybe that's actually how they remember it. I went home that night and I sat on my couch for a long time without turning on any lights. Then I opened my laptop and I started making calls. Monday morning, I called the property management company. I explained that I was a co-signer on the Carver Street lease, and I had some questions about the renewal process coming up in 6 weeks. The woman I spoke to was helpful and detailed. She told me that co-signers have the same rights as primary tenants in terms of lease notification. She told me that any changes to the lease, renewal terms, removal of a co-signer, changes to named occupants, required the consent of all parties currently on the document. All parties, including me. I asked what the process was if a co-signer did not want to renew. She walked me through it carefully. If I declined to renew as co-signer, the current tenants would need to qualify independently or find a new co-signer before the lease term ended. If they could not, the lease would not be renewed under its current structure. I thanked her. I wrote everything down. I called Shelby next. She'd been in property management for 8 years and had seen enough situations to be useful without being dramatic. I told her the full picture. The 14 months, the spreadsheet, the Sunday phone call, the thing my mom said in the kitchen. She said, "So they've been living there on your credit this whole time, and they think they're independent." I said, "That is exactly the situation." She said, "Okay. So let me tell you what your actual options are." She explained that since I was on the lease, I had standing to be informed of and involved in any renewal. I had the right to formally notify the landlord of my intent not to renew as co-signer. I could also, given the lease terms and the undisclosed occupant addition, the sister-in-law, who is living there but not on the lease, flag a potential lease violation. I didn't want to flag a violation. That felt like using a sledgehammer when it could do. What I wanted was simpler. I wanted my name off that lease. I wanted the remaining 3 months of payments to be covered without me. And I wanted my brother to have one honest conversation with me before that happened. I sent him a text that evening. Not long, not emotional. Just, "I'm planning to let the landlord know I won't be renewing as co-signer. The lease is up in 6 weeks. Wanted to give you a heads up so you have time to figure out next steps. Let me know if you want to talk." He called me 20 minutes later. The conversation was not what I expected. I had braced myself for anger, for deflection, for my mom to somehow get patched in. Instead, my brother was quiet. Almost immediately, surprisingly quiet. He said, "You can't just do that." I said, "I can actually. I spoke with the management company. Co-signers have the right to not renew." He said, "You're going to make us lose the apartment." I said, "I'm giving you 6 weeks' notice. That's the same notice a landlord would give. You have time to apply independently or find someone else to co-sign." He said, "My credit is." I said, "I know what your credit is. I've known what your credit is for 14 months. That's why I'm on the lease." Another silence. "I didn't know you felt this way," he said. That sentence landed somewhere strange in my chest. I didn't know you felt this way. As if the $14,000 were a feeling, as if the spreadsheet were a mood. I said, "I've been covering your rent for over a year. I paid your security deposit. I bought your refrigerator. I just want to be removed from the lease when it renews. That's all I'm asking." He said, "Mom's going to be upset." I said, "That might be true." And then I said something I had never said out loud before, something I think I had been working my way toward for 14 months and 7 days. Her being upset doesn't change what's right. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "I need to talk to." And he said my sister-in-law's name, and I said, "Okay," and we hung up. My mom called the next morning at 7:42 a.m. I was still in bed. I watched my phone light up, and I let it go to voicemail. I got up, made coffee, and when I felt ready, I called her back. She said I was making things difficult. She said this could all be sorted out quietly if I just gave them a little more time. She said she was caught in the middle and that it wasn't fair to put her there. I let her say all of it. I've learned to do that. There's a version of me from a few years ago who would have rushed to fill every pause, to apologize preemptively, to soften my own position before she had even finished speaking. I've worked hard on that. I'm not there yet, not completely, but I'm further than I was when she was finished. I said, "Mom, I've paid $14,000 toward that apartment. I am not asking to be paid back right now. I am asking to have my name removed from a financial obligation that I've been carrying alone. That is a reasonable thing to ask." She said, "He's your brother." I said, "I know he is." She said, "Family helps each other." I said, "I agree. That's what I did for 14 months. Another silence. This one was different from the ones before. It had a different texture, not the silence of someone thinking of what to say. The silence of someone who has heard something they can't fully argue with and is recalibrating. She said, "I didn't know it was that much." I said, "I know." She said, "He told me you were splitting everything." I didn't say, "Well, now you know." I didn't say anything pointed. I just said, "The records are pretty clear if you want to see them." She said she needed to think. I said, "Okay." Over the next 2 weeks, things were tense in the specific, quiet way that family tension tends to operate. Not explosive, just present, like a hum you can't locate. My brother and my sister-in-law applied to take over the lease in their names alone. Their application came back with conditions. They would need a larger security deposit due to his credit and her income-to-rent ratio. It was doable, but only barely. I know this because the property manager emailed me. I was still on the lease. I was still a party to everything until I wasn't. My brother called me one more time. He asked if I would be willing to stay on as co-signer for 3 more months while they built up the deposit difference. I thought about it. I genuinely did. I said, "I'll do it under one condition. I want a written acknowledgement of what I've paid, not a legal document, just an honest accounting. And I want a payment plan in writing for the refrigerator and security deposit. Just something that says you know, and you intend to pay me back." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Yeah. Okay." We met at my mom's house on a Saturday. My brother and my sister-in-law sat across from me at the kitchen table. My mom made coffee and then found somewhere else to be, which I understood. On the table was a piece of paper my brother had written out, the amounts, the dates, a rough schedule for repayment. It wasn't a contract, it wasn't notarized, but it existed. He had written it. That mattered to me more than I can easily explain. We sat there for a minute after I looked it over. My sister-in-law said, "I didn't know a lot of this." I believed her. Not entirely, but mostly. The version of events my brother had told her probably had some things missing. I said, "Now you do." I signed on for 3 more months. They made the deposit difference. The lease transferred to their names alone in late spring. My name came off the Carver Street paperwork on a Wednesday. The property manager sent me a confirmation email with a little PDF attached, all signatures, all finalized. I saved it in a folder on my desktop. I didn't tell anyone. I just made myself a cup of tea and stood at my kitchen window for a while, looking at nothing in particular. My mom called that evening, not about the lease. About something else, a recipe she was trying, or a neighbor's cat, something ordinary. And I talked to her about it like a normal person, because that's what we were doing now, finding our way back to ordinary. My brother hasn't paid anything back yet. We're 4 months out. I'm not expecting it this week. But the paper exists, and he knows I have it, and he knows I'm the kind of person who keeps records. That's a different dynamic than the one we had before. It's not a repaired relationship. Not yet. It's something more like a reset, cautious, a little cooler, but honest in a way it wasn't before. I still think about what my mom said at that birthday party. He always finds a way. I've thought about it enough, now that I've made a kind of peace with it. She wasn't lying to my aunt. She wasn't even wrong, exactly. He did find a way. He just found it on my credit report, and I spent 14 months letting that happen because I kept waiting for the story to include me. It does now. I found my own way too, and unlike his, mine cost me nothing I wasn't willing to pay.